it's the Worth Knowing live stream here on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robison, but also simultaneously on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and on the Substack belonging to today's special guest. And I'm going to bring him on in just a minute, but let me set this up because there are two threads I want to talk about today, and I think they're deeply connected. The first is what I teased in the headline for today's show, the question of whether the clock is ticking on Donald Trump and his Republican allies in Congress. It's an argument that's been popping up more and more in the last couple of weeks. Why? Because the walls seem to be closing in on them on many fronts. Prices continue to rise, and Americans continue to say consistently in poll after poll that getting a handle on the cost of living is the number one thing that they were looking for in 2024 and that they're still looking for today. The fact that job growth has completely stagnated and may have even reversed toward the end of the summer strongly suggests that we might be on the verge of a recession or even the dreaded stagflation. That's a word that deserves interrogation. Stagflation, where we see negative growth combined with rising prices. On top of that, following a special election in Arizona, there is now a majority-making 218th vote in the House of Representatives to force a vote on requiring the release of the Epstein Files. It's an issue that simply will not go away and where the pressure is only mounting. As Glenn Kirshner pointed out on this show last week, we have now seen a remarkable series of rulings from Republican-appointed judges, even Trump-appointed judges, calling out the Trump administration in searing terms for illegal, immoral, unconstitutional, and blatantly untethered from facts actions. Over the weekend, we all took a ride on the Trumper coaster as the president launched and then diffused and then reignited a new trade war with China, which is his version of putting out the fire with gasoline. As I pointed out here before, all of this is taking a toll. Recent polling shows not just that the public disapproves of Donald Trump, that's nothing new, but now a near majority of voters, 48%, strongly disapprove of him. That's the polling equivalent of saying we freaking hate this guy. And that's why so many people are beginning to ask whether time is running out and whether Trump's increasingly authoritarian moves are desperate bids to do what he can while he can because the jig might soon be up. And that brings me to the second thread. Many of you probably know media star, political operative, and former guest on this show, Fred Wellman. What you might not know is that Fred has decided to leave the play-by-play booth and run out onto the field. It would be like Kurt Warner putting on his Rams helmet again. And I want to tell you something about being a member of Congress. I should know. I worked for 4 of them as chief of staff or campaign manager for more than a decade. It sucks. You spend 5 hours a day calling everyone you've ever met and asking them the most uncomfortable question you can. Hey, can you give me as much money as you can afford? It's awkward. You work really long hours. You get constantly abused. Every mistake you've ever made in your life, and I've made some doozies, it all gets put on television for all of your friends and neighbors to see. So why do you do it? Like I said, I think these two threads are connected. I think you do this if you're a good person when there's a confluence of caring so much about your country and your community, feeling outraged about it heading in the wrong direction, and seeing an opportunity to do something about it. So I want to explore both of those threads and the connection between them with our very special guest today, Fred Wellman.
Oh,
Fred,
I quit
welcome.
now. Jesus.
So, I'm not putting on any pressure or anything. I'm just expecting you to save the Republic. That's it.
You really made it sound great.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to talk you out of this. I
am stubborn. You're gonna have a
this
hard
is a
time.
no hopium zone, man. Like we tell it like it is. All right. Look, let me get right into the first thread. Like I said, I think we're gonna get around to both of these. David Frum wrote this first in the Atlantic about a week ago. He postulated that Trump's increasingly desperate and authoritarian turn is being driven by the fact that he feels like the clock is ticking. He's running out of time. The jig is up potentially. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I think you do see desperate. I mean, the clues are there, the desperation. I live in Missouri. They just decided to redistrict in the middle of the decade because Donald Trump said, "I want another seat." So they expended just a ton of political capital, if you will, to call a special session of our legislature to get one seat. And we have 8 seats. We had six Republican, 2 Democrat. So they split up Manuel Cleaver's district into 3 parts. In obviously racial lines. I mean, they use the old red line road of the town to split the black and white vote. That's a desperation move. And you and I have been in this business. I was a soldier too. It's like, yeah, when people are doing things, they're throwing things against the wall, it's a desperation move. Now, how desperate? I don't know. I think I'm one of those guys that pursuit is everything, right? So when an enemy is struggling, you pursue. So I do believe the pressure we're putting on them, they realize that they are in trouble. They really thought they'd win this shutdown fight, for example, and they're not. Political opinions against them. I mean, trying to convince average Americans who can look at the TV and see the White House is Republican, the Senate is Republican, the House is Republican, and then say, "Oh, it's the Dems' fault." It's like, nah, that's not. I'm not. The math ain't mathing. So, I do believe they're in trouble. They know they're in trouble. They're trying to get things thrown up against the wall as hard as they can, hope for the best. This desperate attempt to redistrict and gerrymander in the middle of a decade, I believe it's going to backfire. Because the one thing I'm hearing in Missouri a lot is people are angry about that. They see cold. I had a guest I mentioned a lot. He said, "Fred, there's a thing called cold hard reality." And here in Missouri, cold hard reality is settling in. Everything's expensive. It's not just groceries. It's everything's expensive. They just jacked up our electric bills 12% in the middle of the summer. The ACA window is going to open next month. It's going to go up 45% for many people. Everything is more expensive, and no one is talking about it. So yeah, I do. I think they're in trouble. I think they know they're in trouble and they're scared. They should be.
Let me pick up on the piece about the shutdown. I think that this has been sub rosa. To Latinify this, to make it sound more sophisticated. I don't think that the public has been paying a tremendous amount of attention. That's to be expected. But I literally just hit send a couple of hours ago on my latest op-ed for Newsweek. And I'm arguing that Democrats have won the first 2 weeks. I don't mean to make this sound like a sporting match when we're talking about real people's jobs and lives and livelihoods on the line. But in terms of what Democrats set out to do, which is show a little bit of backbone, even incur some painful prices for all of this. As a matter of fact, incurring a price was sort of the point. This was the piece I wrote for Newsweek 2 weeks ago, that they're willing to undergo a painful period where the public may kind of turn against them a little bit on this. They're willing to go through that because it's the only way to unify, to show their activist base, to show the groups that are behind them, hey, we can actually stand up and make a fight of this, and we can get caught trying and go down swinging. But the first 2 weeks haven't played out that way. It's actually been slight advantage Democrats. You see it in polling, as you alluded to. The majority of Americans are either slightly blaming Republicans more or just saying, look, it's a plague on both their houses. So that's been a draw. Yes, there's been a distraction from the Epstein Files and inflation and the stagnating economy. But the distraction was going to happen anyway because Trump is in the middle of his deserved victory lap on the deal in the Middle East. He deserves some credit for that. I'm going to give it to him. We're going to be straightforward, upright and magnanimous about this. So he deserves that. He's taking a victory lap. So that distraction was going to happen anyway. And yes, he's put through some painful layoffs, some really horrible and badly thought out cuts, like his first Dojifying of America. But he's had to walk some of them back because he realized that they were so boneheaded, or someone in his administration did. So it does seem to me that this has been so far playing out about as well as Democrats could have hoped for. Are you seeing it the same way?
Yeah, I do. And look, I don't like shutdowns. It's horrifying. My own daughter owns a small business outside of DC. She sent me her profit chart today. Not great. I mean, this second week, this last weekend, her numbers fell because the people aren't. It's very military heavy area. It's very Fed heavy. They're not spending money. So this is hurting my own family. But you mentioned it very clearly. We are the minority party. The Democrats have very few options in their toolbox, right? And so at some point we have to dig our heel in. And you mentioned the groups. I would even say, and the groups, as I say in the inside baseball, we call them the groups. But actually, I would argue it's the grassroots. I mean, one of the things I've been seeing is as I dial my call time, as you mentioned, as a congressman, you got a congressional candidate, you got to call people. But I'm out and about. I'm visiting the Democratic clubs. I'm participating in the protests. I was at No King's Day last time. I'll be at this one. I'm talking to just regular folks. And what I'm seeing is, like, here in Missouri, our Democratic clubs are growing again. Our Democrat committees are setting up new meetings. I'm going to the first meeting of the new Gravois. A Democratic club that went away has been reborn. There's energy at the grassroots level like it's never seen in a long time in my political experience. And so one of the reasons I decided to run is because of that very reason, that the average Missourian, the average American is seeing what's going on, and they're angry and they're frustrated. And they want to see us fight back. They're looking for fighters. So to see Mr. Jeffries and see Senator Schumer roll up their sleeves and say, you know what, we're done. We're done. We're done appeasing you. We're done giving in everything. The fact is, millions of Americans are going to have their health care shoot through the absolute roof. It's expensive. Life is expensive. You're not doing anything about it while you give tax breaks to billionaires. So it is a bold move to dig their heels in and take the shots to the face. But at some point, you got to stand up to a bully. And at this point, we are. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal article the other day, brother. They did the Wall Street Journal did an article, I think it was last week, talking about how Steve Bannon was saying how everybody in the White House is crowing that they can't believe how docile the House has become. They call they're likening the House to the Duma, the Putin's Duma. That basically just a doormat for them. I've been calling them nothing more than simply a doormat at Trump Inc. That's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, one of the reasons I decided to run for Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Article 1, not 2, 1 is the Congress. And to see them walk away from their constitutional duty and walk away from doing what they're supposed to be doing is making people mad. So it is time we started swinging our fists a little bit and say, no, we're not going to take your BS anymore. We're going to fight back. So, guys like me and you, I mean, yeah, I've been fighting. I was a soldier for 22 years. I've been in the trenches of our political warfare. I think we need folks who are going to step up and kind of dig their heels in and roll their sleeves up and do the fight.
And there's another salutary benefit of making the fight, even if it doesn't come out fully the way you wanted to. And you can look to the lesson of history for this. In 1957, we passed a Civil Rights Act, and it was largely seen as weak and sort of a failure, a bit of a give-in for Northern liberals who were fighting against an entrenched block of, let's say it, Southern Democrats, because at the time, the Democrats were the party of Southern racism. And it's been a little bit lost to history, except for the fact that it paved the way for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, may ultimately be erased by the Supreme Court in the next few months. It was making the fight. It was the proof of concept, swinging your fists a little bit and showing that you weren't going to be such an easy mark to take down, that created a line in the sand and some momentum that eventually President Lyndon Johnson was able to pick up on with his allies in the civil rights movement. I'm not suggesting for a second here that this was just LBJ on his own, and make the ultimate bigger change that we were all looking for. I want to pick up on one just small fun piece of this, and then we can move on. One of the signs that there might be cracks, look, I as a staffer, I did this for a long time, and you see these standoffs on various issues, on funding fights. One of the signs you can look for is, when does the other side start to back channel to you like, hey guys, is there maybe any way that we could, not do this fight anymore? That's an interesting one. Another sign is you see them telling their hard right allies, like, hey guys, if we have to give in here, we'll make it up to you later. We've seen both of these things happen, right? There's been back channeling from Republican leaders about like, hey, maybe we can extend these ACA subsidies so that people don't face 114% premium increase when the open season opens November 1st. And we've seen a quiet caucus call where Mike Johnson outlined to the Freedom Caucus people, hey, we'll make this up to you with cuts later, but we might have to cave here. Another sign of the apocalypse was Marjorie Taylor Greene siding with the Democrats. What?
I mean, I worked on her opponent's campaign 2 cycles ago.
Oh
so
my word!
I know Marjorie Taylor Greene pretty close, man.
Yeah, you're so you're an expert on this. I made the case on my Substack, and I'll go ahead and shill for it for just a moment here on worthknowing.substack.com, up on the page. Appreciate people's subscriptions there. I made the case on Saturday that, this all prompted. So Marjorie Taylor Greene basically took the Democrats' side. And that prompted Trump to say, what's wrong with Marjorie? Now, that's a great perennial question. But I made the case that the answer might be actually nothing new. I actually did a video about this the last time there was a full-on MAGA meltdown about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let me just play, just to give people a taste of where I'm coming from on this. Here it is.
Or you die.
Well, guess who's not winning right now? This gal.
She is an embarrassment to the state of Georgia.
Crazy, Looney Tune, unhinged, moron.
Dipstick, a dingbat.
The Republican Party. All right. I was beginning to have my own technical problems here, but
it's all good.
Marge has been a problem. She's been a thorn in the side. And it's interesting. You know her well from having worked in that district. As much as she's described as a conspiracy theorist and Osama bin Karen and a like a wild-eyed MAGA firebrand, she's not a total Trump stan acolyte. Like she thirsts for his adoration and affection, but she will break with Trump on issues where she sees it as advantageous. So I guess my question to you is she just insane, or is there something to this? Like, is this a sign that, like, wow, you've actually gone too far for Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I think that the thing about her is interesting to me is she is clearly under pressure from her district. The median income in her district, I think, is like $72,000, which is not high. That's because they also include parts of Cobb County. So a large swath of her district is using Medicare and Medicaid. Don't forget also this whole raid in that raid in that Korean plant near Savannah. They're building a giant solar power manufacturing facility in Dalton, in her district. She is square in the crosshairs for a lot of these things that are happening to the MAGA movement for America. And I think to me, I'm seeing a person who has actually heard the message. She has a second-time candidate running against her, in the good generals running against her now. I think she's hearing it. She has said, she alluded in one of her appearances that her own kids are going to be affected by the changes to the ACA. I mean, so there's things there that you can pull those threads. And I'm not going to try to get the psychology of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She has always kind of gone her own way, and she is, of course, a creature of politics in her own way. But in a lot of ways, none of this is wrong. Oh, hey, Shauna. None of this is wrong. I mean, look, somebody asked me in an interview here, it was actually one of the local news. He said, look, Fred, if you go to Washington, as a congressman, our two senators are Eric Schmidt and Josh Hawley, who I've been very, 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 direct in my opposition to those gentlemen. He goes, you may have to work with them. How are you going to do that? How can people be assured you're going to work with us? The title of the job is the job, representative. And if somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Josh Hawley or Eric Schmidt has a good idea or a proposal to improve the lives of the people that elect me, my constituents, not just the people, let me dial that back. The people I'm elected to represent. And that's everybody. If my constituents will have their lives improved by an idea that Josh Hawley has, then I'll work with them. If MTG has a good idea, I'll work with them. Because in the end, one of the reasons we are where we are is because we've all decided we can't work with anybody who has a different letter in front of their name. We're going to have to figure out a way. Now, I'm not talking bipartisanship. I'm talking about doing your goddamn job. Do your job. Because the people of America are sending representatives to Washington, D.C., and they're not doing their job. This House has been out, I want to say they've done, 14 days of work in the last 83 days, some outrageous number. At some point, we have to say, what are we paying for? Why are we sending these people to Washington, D.C. who do not represent us? And so, look, I don't know what her reasoning is, but if she wants to have some common sense and talk about the fact they're ripping healthcare away from millions of people, 21,500 people in my district alone are for sure going to lose their healthcare, if not more. At some point, we need everybody, people of common sense need to go, yeah, this ain't right, because we've crossed that Rubicon, right? None of this makes sense. The tariffs. Why are we throwing tariffs just whenever Trump gets a hemorrhoid, we throw a tariff out? That's Congress's job. They've absconded on their duty. So, we have to push. So, hey, welcome to the party, MTG. If you're gonna fight for the common people, great. Let's fight. I'm not gonna give you money for your re-election, but in the end, we're supposed to be serving the American people. So I welcome anybody to the fight who wants to fight for the good of all American people and not just the people who vote for them.
It's such an important point, and I think it is critical for the credibility that we need to establish in the minds of independent voters who may have gotten the impression, based on Trump's attacks and Republican attacks in recent years, that, Democrats are all suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, and we're all the chairman of Gay Witches for Abortion living here in Wokistan. And I am willing, and I think it's important to give credit where it's due. I mentioned before, Donald Trump is in the middle of a victory lap, and he deserves it. He did a good thing. I can say that out loud and feel no shame about it. I am someone who has received a full-on bear hug from Katherine Harris. True story. An actual, spine crushing, my rib is still sore bear hug from Katherine Harris, who was Marjorie Taylor Greene 20 years ago. So it is absolutely possible to point out, look, RFK Jr., he's a deranged lunatic who wants to take away your Tylenol and thinks that pregnant women should just, how did Trump put it? Tough it out. That's insane. That's insane. Yep. But he's done a good thing when it comes to remaking the way that rates for procedures are compensated for doctors. Now, that's a real rabbit hole of a policy issue.
Yes, it is. Because you work at Capitol Hill. You can tell you work at Capitol Hill.
but the issue here, yes, exactly. But the issue here is that we spend way too much in this country on expensive post hoc treatments when people get sick, on scans, on fancy procedures, not nearly enough on wellness, preventative care, first line medicine, the kind that my wife as a primary care physician practices. And he has done a good thing in trying to fix that. I think it's essential to point out the areas where Republicans and Democrats really agree, which is a shocking percentage of the time once you get outside the extremes, the MAGA-sphere, and Wokistan. Speaking of which, let's talk about your insane decision to run for Congress. Fred, what the fuck are you thinking? Man, I'm not trying to talk you out of this, but this really sucks. Okay, I'm not gonna. All right, let's do this. I'm gonna let you answer that, and then we'll get to some fun stuff.
Oh, I swore for years I'd never run. I mean, we've talked about it. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to run. Look, I have a past. I've had things happen in my past. I'm not a petri dish candidate by any stretch of the imagination. But to be honest, I've been here in Missouri, back home again 4 years now. I've got adult children. I'm watching the impact of this moment on my adult children. My oldest son-in-law is a National Guardsman in Virginia. He was at the Unite the Right rally. My oldest son works in a major corporation. He and his wife, they've been struggling to get out of their starter home because they can't afford to get a home. My youngest daughter is a small business owner and manufacturer. The tariffs are killing her. She had their worst July in 5 years for no other reason than the tariffs and the economic impact. Now they're struggling because of this shutdown. My youngest son was a bartender a year ago. He's not now, but he was a bartender, full-time bartender at a local restaurant chain in Richmond, Virginia. When the ACA window opened, he put in for an ACA, ended up getting qualified for Medicaid while working full-time as a bartender. And as I'm hearing and seeing this from my own children, I look on TV one weekend and there's the Republican Senate arguing about how many more people they want to cut off from their Medicare and Medicaid benefits and their SNAP benefits because the House didn't cut enough of them off. And the split screen at the moment, if you guys remember, was Jeff Bezos' wedding in Venice. and the millionaires and billionaires partying in Venice while the U.S. Senate and the House were debating how many Americans they're going to absolutely cut off from their health care. And I just got angry. And to see them saying things like, well, you know what we've got? We've got 28-year-old men who lay around the couch playing video games getting free healthcare. My son is not laying around. And so the disdain they have for the people they're supposed to be serving. And my story, I have the most complicated bio. I think you read a little bit. I was in the Army for 22 years. I went to West Point. I had a business for 10 years as a veterans advocate. I ran a COVID field hospital. I got involved in the Lincoln Project, politics. I'm good luck reading my bio. But all the threads through that is when the moment called, when I felt there was a moment that I could step forward and make a difference for my community, for my country, I did. When 9/11 hit, I was a reservist. I could have gotten a lot of my reserve brothers and sisters ducked being mobilized because they had jobs. I volunteered to go back in full time. I rejoined the active duty. Like I said, when COVID hit, I went to New York to run a hospital. My life story is when the moment is when I feel like I can contribute. Not only when I feel like I contribute, I do. And you mentioned it. I'm internet famous. I have I think 900,000 followers across all my social media channels. My show on the Midas Touch Network gets, I don't know, 100,000 views, whatever. It's amazing, right? It's just humbling. I was sitting there in July and I said, look, I could keep doing this. I keep talking to the camera. I could keep doing this, or I could use this incredible gift I have of people who listen to me and people who know me and a voice and use that for a different reason. And so the opportunity came up that our representative, Ann Wagner, who has absconded from her duty. She hasn't held the town hall in 13 years, never. She's tripled her net worth in Congress to $26 million by some estimates. There's one estimate. Quiver Analytics did the numbers, and her portfolio earned $3.6 million in June, in 1 month. And so I'm like, this isn't representing us. This doesn't represent my neighbors in Missouri. It doesn't represent the needs of our communities. And so I started talking to people, and they said you should run, and here I am.
Let me pick up on that point. I think you did something very interesting in your first ad. It's something that I've been talking about on this show. I've been calling for about a month now. And by the way, for our listeners, people who are going to encounter this on audio only, like cavemen, like back in the day when we could only listen to podcasts. There's some people who still like that. Like,
yes, it's cool. And we love you. We love you.
So you heard Fred greet one of our chatters, and I would like to, first of all, say hi to all of our chatters. And second of all, people in the chats, this is a challenge to you. I've been talking about this theme for a few weeks. And what I'd like to do, Fred, is play your intro ad that you ran. It's worth it. It's really well done. And I want to see if people can pick up on the theme that you've embedded in here that I think is great guidance for Democrats. Here we go.
There have been Wellmans running the sound of the gun for this country even before it was a country. First, in the French and Indian War. Then, in my grandfather, an Army Air Corpsman in World War I. My dad, a World War II Marine who moved to St. Louis with my mom to pursue their American dream. And then me, a kid from Kirkwood who grew up watching fighters fly in and out of Lambert Field, dreaming of becoming a military pilot. And I did. I graduated West Point, became an Army aviator just in time for Desert Storm. And I saw the damage of war way too close. When my wife, 7 months pregnant, died in a car crash, I thought my life's over, even before it's begun. But I wasn't done yet. I did 3 tours in Iraq, came home, started over, fighting for veterans benefits, heading up a COVID field hospital, organizing volunteers and donations for refugees. I lost everything again during the pandemic, but I never stopped giving back to the place that raised me and the people who feel forgotten by our government and absolutely disrespected by our Congress member. Ann Wagner doesn't even try. 13 years in Washington, she's not come back to do one town hall, too busy hitting refresh in her stock portfolio. Wagner clipped $3 million in 1 month, profiting off the same companies she's supposed to be overseeing in Congress. At the same time, she voted to cut our health care, hike our insurance premiums, and gut medical research that supports a heck of a lot of jobs around here. And the only thing she's done on prices is drive them up higher. See, insiders like Ann Wagner, they think we're suckers. They bail out the billionaires and they screw over the rest of us. I'm Fred Wellman, and I'm running for Congress because we deserve a fighter for regular people who work their butts off to put food on the table, and gas in the tank. Someone who gets the challenges you face every single day, because hell, I face them too. I've lost everything in my life twice, and our communities have lost too. But you don't give up, we just fight harder. I'm asking you to join me because I'm not done yet, you're not done yet, and Missouri is not done yet. Let's get to work.
All right. I'm wondering if people spotted it, and I'll cut to the chase on it. I love the contrast that you set up here and the theme of this isn't what you voted for. The reminder that, as I said in the intro, the number one issue for 2 years now for the majority of Americans has been the cost of living. People cannot make it in this economy, and they're angry and they're frustrated. And many of them voted for change. They saw Donald Trump as the change candidate. They saw Republicans in Congress as part of that wave, part of that pushback against a situation they didn't like.
Yep.
But this isn't what they voted for. And the key to the corruption theme, which keeps coming up to me, is you can't just run against corruption because that's baked in. People know that Donald Trump is corrupt. They know that his cronies are corrupt. It's the contrast and tying it to they're doing this corruption. They're doing nothing for your cost of living, for your grocery bills, for your price of gas that's going in your car. That, to me, is the winning theme that connects how we have to run against Donald Trump and how we have to run against his allies who are guilty of the same damn thing like Ann Wagner.
Thank you. And the nice thing is I didn't do any poll testing or focus groups. That's just how I feel. I mean, that it's just, like I said, I'm not making, this isn't a story that was made up in a polling group. It was me just like, what are we doing, man? It's like, I'm looking at, I can't tell you, man, how many times I've talked to neighbors and friends and in the district and speeches I've given, and how many people walk up to me who look a lot like me, maybe a Gen Xer, has got kids who are teenagers or in their 20s, and they're saying, my kids don't have the American dream I had. Like, I don't know if my kids are going to be able to buy a house. I don't know if my kids, when they graduate college, are going to have jobs waiting for them. And I can't help to ask myself, like, what have we done? What are we handing the next generation? And what are we doing if we don't step up and do something? And our representatives are not doing anything. They're not doing anything to it. Like I said, Ann Wagner, especially, my opponent, has done zero. She's on the banking committee. She sits in she's the chairman of the financial services subcommittee. She's passed more of her bills have pertained to the banking industry than Missouri. So who is your constituent? Is your constituent Missourians or banks? And I'm troubled by that. And if we're not going to have representation in Washington, let's fire them. And this isn't even about left versus right or Democrat versus Republicans. Like, who do you want? Do you want somebody who's actually lived a lived life, has had some tough times, and dusted himself off and got back to work like we all have to? Or do you want somebody who's a multimillionaire and kind of doing it as a hobby, apparently? So I do think there's an opportunity for we Democrats to tell that story. Like, look, this isn't about anything but who are we as a nation at this moment? And that thread, I think, Matt, does pull these other issues we touched at the beginning. Masked men kidnapping people out of the bus drop-off line. Like, they grabbed a woman in Chicago out of the elementary school pickup line who was a legal resident. What we have to ask ourselves, who are we as a nation? What are we becoming? And are we comfortable with this being done in our name? Put aside politics. Are we comfortable? And I'm not.
I have long maintained and said on this show that if Ronald Reagan came back from the dead and saw what was being done in his name through the party that he helped to build 40 years ago, he would never stop throwing up. Yeah. Anyone who is a constitutional conservative has to be aghast at what they're seeing, not just from the Supreme Court, but from this administration. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans used to fear an excess of federal government power. And they used to fear this kind of clamping down on people's privacy, their own self-determination, their own rights, the Constitution. And I agree with you. I mean, look, this is tough. I know that the Democratic Party label can be fraught in some places, but I agree with you that this is ultimately Forget the label. You don't have to be attached to any caricature of what the National Party is about. What you are attached to is your experience, what you've done in your life, your history of service, and the contrast to someone who seems to be in this for themselves and is doing nothing for what Americans voted for, what Missourians voted for, which is do something about my cost of living. Do something so that I can actually get ahead and get a great job and live a middle class, upper middle class lifestyle that I've worked for. Now, one thing that may jump out to people is this is a tough race. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to kid themselves. I'm also old enough to remember when Missouri was a swing state. It's not.
Me too. Bellwether.
But
We were a bellwether state.
it's actually painful for me to think back to it. But
no idea.
I think that it's quite possible that people are missing something with this congressional district. And I want to both make that case a little bit, but also I want to hear you make it, because I think there's something to it. Let's take a look for a second, first of all, at Charlie Cook's race ratings here. Now, there's a little bit of a weirdness going on. And for those listening on audio, sorry, subscribe to worthknowing.substack.com and you will get the full video of all this later. Worthknowing.substack.com. The weirdness here is that on the left in red, you see the race rating. Solid R. Okay. Forget about this one. You're toast, Wellman. But over here, you see a 50-50 partisan voting index. Let the mystery deepen. Okay. That means that the way this district performs, it should be a toss-up. Let me show you something else. Here is, now, I will say that Congresswoman Wagner did win by 13 points in her last two races.
Yep.
But look at 2020.
Yep.
That is a 6.4 percentage point margin of victory.
Yep.
And if you're talking about a race, if you're talking about a district that is so solidly Republican, that is a weak candidate. Let me show you 2018.
Yep.
Same thing. Even less, 4 points. That is a sign of weakness. And so I know how I look at these things back in my congressional management days. When I went into a race like this, I would say, well, shoot, I can see where the votes are. I can see where the vulnerability is. How are you seeing it?
I agree. So they did redistrict in 2020. So that just a little bit more. They're trying to redistrict again. We think it's going to fail. Let's talk about the last two races. Wonderful candidates. I'm friends with every one of these people who have run. We feel some great candidates. But structural challenges made it very hard for them. The last two races, unfortunately, were not able to kind of nationalize the race. There was no DCCC focus. There was no national focus in the race. Ann was solidly in, of course, but she underperformed Trump significantly this last cycle. So that's a very significant portion of it too. On top of that, what we're seeing is we've got polls showing her underwater. She's deeply unpopular. She has become more and more unpopular. Her negative ratings are growing. This hasn't helped. Her recent activities this last year have not helped in any way. But for me, you see keys. Missouri, the St. Louis County is 72% district. That has gone progressively more blue. This district is 13th on the list of red to blue districts in the last 10 years. So it is progressively turning blue. It's right at the top of lists of districts that are shifting. And then you got the national dynamic. What I look at, if you look at the race there, Lucas Coons, when he ran for Senate, Marine Corps veteran against Josh Hawley this last cycle, Lucas Coons almost won the district. Okay. He almost won this. He only lost by about, I think 4.9 or 5.9 point. He almost won this district, the entire district. So there's a hunger for that kind of a candidate, perhaps. So I think we're seeing is you have to look at all the different factors. I don't do too entirely political. Now let's talk about this cycle. Again, we have polls showing she's underwater. We're going to do some more polls in the next 2 weeks. So hopefully people hear from us with our polling. But on top of that, you've got a national focus. The DCCC has focused on Missouri 2 as a targeted race. It is part of their 33 races. So they see a vulnerability. Other national groups have stepped in. Matter of fact, we just saw an announcement today that the Democratic National Committee themselves are going to be running ads here in Missouri too online about the soybean problem. Our second largest crop in Franklin County, one of my district counties, is soybeans. So the DNC is running targeted ads in this district specifically about the soybean crop being unsold and the problems we're having with our farmers. So when you have that, and you notice something, both Jill and Court, the ones you showed, those had national attention races. That was the year we had DCCC support. So the national help helps a lot because look, the people here, look, you can't just do it on your own. I was a soldier. No unit in the military operates alone. We have support from the air. We have support from the sea. You have tanks and infantry together. We call it combined arms operation. To win this district, we need a combined arms operation. What I am fortunate with is me as a candidate, as we mentioned earlier, I've got a fairly large following. I have friends like you. I've had the ability to tell my story effectively to a very large audience. Here on Substack, we've got like 41,000 people that subscribe. So I have the ability to get the attention of folks nationally and say, hey, pay attention to this race, have some faith, invest in the ability to flip Missouri. But most importantly for me here in Missouri too, we have about, I want to say a dozen House races for the state House. If we flip even 2 or 3 of those House races within Congressional District 2, we'll break the supermajority that the Republicans have in the Missouri legislature. So if we run an effective race that is professional and is focused on field operations and getting the energy out there, which is the next piece, we could actually change Missouri very directly. And that third piece that I really want to believe, that I feel very strongly about, is, I'm an old pilot, Matt. And the thing about flying, they tell you, is all about energy, man. People talk, especially the fighter jet guys, talk about energy management, but not so much in helicopters, but in fighter jets, it's energy management. It is altitude and airspeed. Altitude, airspeed. If you lose either of those things, you crash, right? And so there's a certain energy, and donors and money, that's the fuel in the engine. But in the end, you need energy. You need people being fired up about a race. You need people to want to come out. We gathered 7,000 people by hand count on Manchester Road, which is the main artery going through West St. Louis County, on No King's Day last time. 7,000. I walked it. We had nuns out there, man. There was nuns. We had senior citizens. We had kids out there. We had people in costumes with handmade signs. 7,000 people came out to say, we do not accept this authoritarian movement. We do not accept what's happening to our sisters and brothers in our communities. We do not accept our rights being stripped. If we can harness that energy and turn that into an effective field campaign, an effective campaign for office in the next year, we will win. And that's part of the biggest challenge. So while we want to raise money, and by the way, wellman4mo.com, if we raise enough money, if we build, and then, by the way, it's not just volunteers, it's hiring field people, it's hiring district managers, it's hiring precinct captains, then getting our volunteers who've been the people showing up for these marches, showing up with this energy. If we can harness that energy, we will win. It's that simple. And so I'm happy to go to every Democratic club in the district. I'm happy to go to anywhere anybody invites me. We'll be in St. Charles at Do Something St. Charles, which is a wonderful event they've been having around here where all these different groups come together. We're going to be there tabling, talking to folks. In the end, that's the secret sauce, if you ask me, is the energy we feel within the communities, within the groups. If we turn that energy into action, we win. It's just that simple. Now, scientifically, run everywhere. Sure, western part of the district is very red, 90-10, 80-20, great. But we know from experience that if we run everywhere, if we introduce them to the democratic ideals, we know that a proposition in the past for paid sick leave passed by 20,000 votes. Paid sick leave, the constitutional amendment here passed by 20,000 votes. The constitutional amendment for abortion care for women passed by 13,000 votes. Passed. Not failing. Those are democratic ideals that pass. So we know our ideas have merit, and we just have to present them to people. So I believe if we run everywhere in the district, if I'm out in Franklin County, if I'm out in Warren County, if I'm out in St. Charles County, look, I don't have to win it. If we lose 60-40 and get turnout in St. Louis and create some new events, I stupidly end up in Congress. And so I really believe the key is those factors: harnessing the energy, turning out the voters who support us, get out the vote, and then making an admirable and heartfelt and forward effort to convince those who wouldn't normally vote for a Democrat to give one a chance for once. And again, I think we don't actually have to win everywhere. We just have to win enough to win the vote. So it's a multi-pronged effort, but I absolutely believe that we can invest in this race. I hope people nationally will invest in this race, throw in a couple of bucks, and have faith that we're putting together a winning combination. This isn't a toss-off race. This isn't one of those jousting at windmills ones. I already burned out on those. I get it. The numbers work, and if you know me, you know I don't do anything to lose. Okay, that's not what I sign up for. I'm going in this to win this race and take this seat back for the people who deserve representation in Washington.
I want to address a comment here from one of our most incisive commenters, the Cynthia Rice, which is like the Ohio State University. I've made that joke before, and I'm going to make it again because I find the Ohio State University extremely obnoxious. I do not find the Cynthia Rice extremely obnoxious. I find her extremely insightful. And she points out that MAGA will never vote blue. Best we can hope for is they stay home. Agreed. I think that's a great point. And one of the things that we're seeing, MJ agrees, one of the things that we're seeing is real enthusiasm gap nationally in terms of Republican base voters versus Democratic base voters.
Yes.
One of the ways in which I wanted to connect the two threads that I teased at the top of the show, this idea that Trump sees the clock ticking against him. He's running out of time. He's running out of runway. He feels the walls closing in like trash compactor in A New Hope. And your run for Congress is that this idea of an enthusiasm gap is so critical. I don't think you're going to convince the MAGAs to vote for you.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are awfully more people who are open-minded, who are open to the argument that you launched in your launch ad of, this is not what I voted for.
Right.
I voted to lower the price of eggs. I thought maybe what I was hearing about Kamala was a little too woke. Didn't like that. Hey, let's get a handle on our border. That's what I voted for. But that's not what I'm getting. I didn't vote for masked hooligans snatching people off the streets. That's not the Republican Party that I grew up in, right? I didn't vote for runaway inflation and another trade war with China just because of our dear leader's ego. That doesn't do anything for me. And I wanted to make a point that I briefly splashed up on the screen before. I've run a race like yours before, where in the polling in the week before Election Day, we were down between 5 and 9 points.
Yep.
But I saw that what we really needed to do was get within the red zone. We needed to get within striking distance because I thought we could out execute by running a better campaign on Election Day. I thought we could get people, again, per Cynthia's point, MJ's point. It wasn't about persuading the MAGAs. It was about our side was going to be fired up. We could get them to the polls. And you're in a better position than I was in that race because of the generic ballot. What I'm showing on the screen right now is relatively recent polling. Is a little dated at this point. The generic ballot is incredibly predictive. And what we're seeing is Democrats are way out in front.
Yep.
About 6 points, as the kids would say these days, 6, 7.
That's where we're here.
And that puts you within striking distance. That puts you pretty damn close.
It does.
It puts you in the red zone to execute with a strong goal line play, which I think you can do. And I think you make a really good point. I want to be clear that I think I was hearing you correctly, that you're not running just to make a good fight of it. You truly have a plan that takes you over the finish line, that takes you to winning.
Correct.
But even if you just come close, there's value in that. I mean, it's like the movie The Great Escape depicted. There used to be a sworn oath among officers in both the British and the American military that if they were captured, they would do everything possible to tie up as many resources as possible from the enemy to hold them. And that's, in essence, what you're saying is sort of the floor on the upside of your running. Is at the very least, you're going to make Republican National Committee people have fits.
That's it.
And the upside is we could turn back some of the gerrymandering and seat snatching that we're seeing nationally by winning the seat. And you could have down ballot effects that would turn the tide in Missouri in the state house.
all those things. And they burned a lot of political capital with this mid-decade redistricting. I am hearing from Republicans who are angry too. It is Republicans and independents signing the ballot initiative. The wonderful thing about Missouri, and the painful thing about Missouri too, is that we have a ballot initiative process where if we get enough signatures, we could put something on the ballot. 27 times in Missouri history, we've had citizen vetoes or initiatives to veto a law, and 25 out of 27 times we vetoed that law. Okay, so what we're doing right now is gathering those signatures to put on the ballot. And let me tell you, Republicans are signing that initiative. Okay, Republicans are angry too. Now, going back to what Cynthia Rice said. Hi, Cynthia. Yes, MAGA won't. That's true. But we also know the MAGA movement is about 30 to 33% at most of their movement. That's been the truth. It's never really gone further than that. There are traditional Republicans who do vote red. There are traditional independents who do lean towards that way. But that's where that cold, hard reality is coming in. One of my dear friends that I grew up with in my neighborhood, who lives out in Union, which is part of the western portion of my district in Franklin County, she texted me yesterday. She said, I got to tell you this. She says, my, quote, trumpeter, she calls it my trumpeter neighbor, has asked to go with me to our Democratic club meeting because she voted for him and she regrets it. I'm not making this up. I'll show you the text. Okay. There is a cold, hard reality settling in that I did not sign up for this. Missouri is a very independent state. It is called the Show Me State for a reason. It's not because we want you to show us. It actually came from a speech that one of our senators gave, or a congressman gave many years ago, 1899. Where he said, look, I'm from Missouri, and flowery speech, it doesn't move me. You got to show me the facts. And that's what we are. And the facts are being shown to Missourians, the stubborn people we are, the Missouri Mule people we are, that we're not being supported, we're not being represented, and our needs and values are not being met. And I think if we have somebody like me, perhaps, maybe I'm the right guy, maybe I'm not, I hope so, that says, look, this is what I stand for. These are my values. They've never changed. We can agree and disagree on a lot of things. But the fact is, we do know that we are struggling as a country. We're struggling as a district. We're seeing things taken away from us, and we're seeing the dreams for our children fade. And for nothing else, we owe them to do everything we humanly can to turn back that tide of grief and worry. We're seeing study after study showing that Gen Z and millennial kids and now Gen Alpha are going, there's nothing for us. When my son told me that he's a veteran, I hope he doesn't mind me telling the story. My son, when I told my son I was going to run, my oldest son, he says to me, he was thrilled. I was shocked because he's not political at all. They're all worried about my safety. My kids are very worried about me getting, shot, which is a thing. But my son said to me, he goes, yeah, Dad, I'm glad you're doing it. Because, it just feels like our only value these days is shareholder value. Now imagine a 32-year-old man with a child and another on the way who's a veteran, combat veteran, the 82nd freaking Airborne, a veteran. Well, he's not a combat veteran. He's a veteran of the 82nd Airborne. He's actually an MP, SWAT team. Says that to his dad that, we've pretty much figured out that our value is increasing shareholder value. What the F have we done? What the F have we done as a generation and as Americans if we're handing our kids' generations the idea that their value to our nation is increasing shareholder value for some fucking corporation? I don't accept it. So we all have to figure out what we're going to do as a country and as voters and activists. And again, I'm sorry, folks, voting is not enough. Now, I want you to vote. Donation. Look, I know times are tough. You may not be able to donate. Look, early money. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I need early money. I'm not going to blow smoke up your butt. But by God, use the powers you have. Call, postcard, canvas. Get out those peaceful and patriotic protests. Use your voices. Make sure they know we're not satisfied. And then volunteer like crazy for whatever your local campaign is. I don't care if it's county council or if I'm so blessed to have your support as a Congress candidate. But if we don't pull our heads out of our backsides and figure out that we're handing an entire next generations of Americans a shit show because we failed to act when we had the moment, then that, goddamn us, that we deserve whatever damnation we get. But I won't, look, I volunteered to go to war twice. I volunteered to go to New York during COVID. I volunteered to help Afghan refugees when they came to St. Louis. We have to hear the sounds of the trumpets and act. and see what's happening to our country. So that's my passionate rant. But look, I'm not going to take the surrender stuff. I love you guys. I know a lot of people say, oh, we may not even have an election, Fred. I've heard that one. Or you're never going to get Republicans to vote for you. You know what? I'm going to die trying. I'm going to get out there. We're going to knock doors. We're going to have honest conversations that are uncomfortable as hell. And we're going to see how many people we can turn. And by God, let's see on November 4th, if by happenstance I end up being a congressman, and then it's going to get really interesting fast.
I want to pick up on that as we enter the home stretch of this show. It's also the home stretch before our next No King's Day coming up.
Yeah.
And I've become a bit of a broken record on this point, and I'm going to go ahead and skip to it again. I am fine with No King's protests. I get some energy from seeing so many fellow Americans out expressing their opposition to the authoritarian overreach and narcissistic meltdown that we see from our president and his enablers in Congress. I appreciate it. But if it's just a lot of heat without a magnifying lens put to it by people who are activists, by advocacy groups, by organizers, if we don't focus it on anything, it's going to just dissipate.
Yes.
We'll get a pleasant tan.
Yes.
We've got to focus it. And what's so incredible is that in just the last few weeks, we've seen a palpable demonstration of the amount of power that we wield as citizens. And it came, of all things, via the Jimmy Kimmel case. We put on economic and, I hate, for lack of a better term, jawboning pressure on a huge American corporation to say, we absolutely reject this. We are going to hold you accountable with the votes of our feet and our pocketbooks. And it worked. And my suggestion was, all right, let's take Sinclair down next. It didn't quite, they folded before we could get around to it. But we actually wield, it was a tremendous demonstration of what we can do when we mobilize with focus. And that's sort of my point, going back to the top and the Newsweek article that should be coming out by tomorrow. I'll put it on my Substack, worthknowing.substack.com, if you want to catch it. This is part of my point about why Democratic leaders had to pursue this shutdown. They had to go down swinging. They had to take a punch and show the fight and get a little bit of focus for the party. And it might work. I think there are signs that this might work. And the worst thing we could do, if it does work, if we do get Republicans to fold on this in our fight for healthcare, is to then let that momentum dissipate. So I guess my shout out to everyone out there is just what you said. If you have the means, I am telling you, like, it would be great for people to donate to Fred. I will
very much appreciate it.
Yes. But, donate if you can. Yeah. If you can't, use the power of withholding your economic resources from the places, but don't just do it scattershot. Like, let's organize together and do it in a targeted way so we can flex our economic muscles. And sure, show up to the No Kings protests. Let's get some power together by gathering together, and let's not defeat ourselves by giving up before we've even entered the fight, which is essentially what you're saying by running in what is granted a difficult seat, what is granted what Charlie Cook thinks. Well, it depends on which version of it you look at, but he thinks it's going to be an uphill fight. But I think we have demonstrated that you winning is quite possible. And at the very least, this is the final thing I'll say, and I'll give you the last word. At the very least, I wasn't just blowing smoke about how much being a member of Congress and running for Congress sucks. You are not, my friend, in for a fun year. You're not. You are going to get slimed. You are going to be attacked. And, the last thing I would want is all of my worst moments put on television. But that's what's going to happen to you. And if you win, your lifestyle will not be pleasant. But I get the sense that you've signed up for difficult missions before. Yeah. And my question to you is, are you done yet?
Well, that's the tattoo.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for getting my message. Yeah, look, I know all those things. And that's why I'm running. Look, somebody asked me, are you worried about the danger? I mean, we just had legislators killed in Minnesota. Candidates been threatened. That's Tuesday for me. When I stepped into the arena, when I joined the Lincoln Project in 2020, I stepped right into the middle of it. When I took over as executive director, when they had their crisis to investigate that, I was attacked. They ran hit pieces on me in the Washington Free Beacon. As a private citizen, I've been attacked. I've been doxxed so many times I can't even count. Like 5 times last year. I've had to call the police to chase off people outside my house. They want us scared. They want us to be afraid of the hard things. And the one thing I was taught by my Marine dad from World War II is that people like us who have had hard lives, who have done difficult things. I lost my wife and child. That commercial's eerily true. I watched that commercial and I'm like, that combat footage is my actual combat footage. Those are my Apaches. That combat footage you see in my ad are my Apaches. That's the last battle of Desert Storm. Those are the Apaches that I was scouting for, blowing up Iraqi vehicles in the last battle of that's literally war footage from my battles. I've never shrunk from a challenge. It is sort of who I am. One of the proudest things of this decision to run was all 4 of my adult children said, yeah, it makes sense. None of them were like, oh, you're all. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of
they didn't call me.
It's like, yeah, that's what he does. And my wonderful fiance, who is against this in every way, but supports me in every human way, because we know it's going to make our lives harder. We both have difficult jobs. She has a very difficult job, but we accept that sometimes a moment calls for people who've been through difficult things to stand up to it. And if not people like us who have got the scars, who've got the my dark skeletons, great, bring it up. Everybody knows. In the end, that's why I've embraced it. Like, go for it. It's like I did my duty. They try to attack me by joining the Lincoln Project. You're damn right. I joined the Lincoln Project. But you know why? Donald Trump needed to be stopped. And I worked hard to convince veterans and military family members not to vote for him a second time. And his voting record between 2016 and 2020, 6% of veterans who had voted for him the first time changed their minds. That I'm proud of. I stepped up to a mission. What happened there? I'm the guy that investigated it. I'm not the guy that caused it. I'm the guy that investigated. So I'm not going to hide from my past. It's all public record, but that's the point. Lots of us have past. And if we don't get average Americans who had the ability to run to step up and run, it's just like the famous phrase, if not me, then who? And so I'm very, very proud of what we're doing. I'm proud of the incredible people that have joined my campaign. I mean, names nationally have joined my campaign because they do believe that this mission matters. I believe it too. So I appreciate all of that. I'm very humbled by all of it. I've been humbled by the incredible energy and support I've gotten. The good people here on Substack and online and everywhere else. We are truly in a moment for our country. We are at a crossroads. And all of us have to make a decision where we want to go. Okay. And do you want to step up or do you want to hide in the ditch? And, I watched Band of Brothers a lot. I'm a 101st Airborne veteran. I did 7 years in the 101st Airborne, including my first combat or Iraq tour. There's that famous scene where they cross the berm and there's an SS battalion in front of them. And Dick Winter says, charge, or go back to Gettysburg. Joshua Chamberlain, my hero, my true hero of my life. Josh, I have 2 books on Joshua Chamberlain back here. Ran out of ammo. We're going to fix bayonets. We're going to charge down the hill into the enemy and save the Union. There are just moments that, for happenstance or luck, you end up being in that moment where you have an opportunity. I'm not saying I'm that guy, but I do believe we're in a moment as a nation where that statue at Fort Benning is so relevant. If you know what I'm talking about, an infantry person, it's a statue of Follow Me. It's called the Follow Me. It's this famous statue of an infantryman standing up and sticking his arm in the air and say, follow me. And I think there's a time in this country where people are looking for somebody to stand up amidst the fire and say, follow me. And if that's me this time at this moment, then I'd be very, very honored to have people follow me and do this.
Couldn't think of a better note to end on. And we have to get you back on that glorious grace note to the dirty business of raising money, which I hope people will consider engaging in with you. And if not, with your funds, then with your time and with your labor for Fred or for anyone else who is engaged in the fight. And for everyone else, for the thousands of people who have been tuning in, it's been delightful to see you all. Stay safe, be well. These are difficult times. And Fred, I really appreciate the fact that you are trying. You're putting yourself forward to try to make them a little bit better. For all of our regular listeners and viewers, we will see you back here next week. I am Matt Robison of the Worth Knowing Substack, and I've got so many other great guests like Fred coming up shortly. So really looking forward to that. I will see everyone soon. Stay safe, be well.
Thank you.